Hello, everybody. It's been a few weeks since we've been on. I've been under the weather with COVID, and my voice is not real good. So Jimmy and Dale are going to take over most of the conversation today. Pardon me. Um, Dale has a few words to say. We lost two good ones this past month, and Dale and Jimmy have some things to say about that. So Dale, you want to go ahead and start?
Yeah, the baseball world and the umpire community lost a couple people that were close to us. Billy Beane passed away August 5th, I believe. He had been battling cancer. Billy wrote the foreword to my book, just to let everyone that aren't maybe familiar with it. First of all, it's the Billy Beane, not the Oakland A's GM, but Billy Beane, the former ball player with Detroit, San Diego, and Los Angeles, who retired uh, early in his career because he was gay, and he was the pressures of him in a clubhouse and living this lie became so great that he didn't believe he could go on anymore, and so he retired from baseball when he still had a few years for sure ahead of him in the game that he loved so much. About 5 years later, approximately, he wrote a book going the other way and came out as gay, and was one of the few former players to do that. Billy then, for several years, he was in Florida and California selling real estate. But then in 2014, Commissioner Bud Selig uh, hired Billy. At the time, his title was the ambassador of inclusion, but his main role was to inclusion is to let everybody in professional baseball, both the major leagues, minor leagues, not just players, team personnel, front office people, anybody, umpires, anybody that was involved in baseball. Baseball was making a statement saying everyone is welcome, gay, straight, bi, any type of minorities or everyone is welcome in baseball. And this was way ahead of the curve when Commissioner Selig did this. And Billy was a perfect choice for this job, for that job. He for the 10 years that he was there, he was elevated as far as his status within baseball. He was assistant to the commissioner and vice president when he passed away. The good that he did for both the minor and major leagues is if we have to do several podcasts to list all that. Me personally, I when Billy came out in his book in '99, and then when we started working both leagues in 2000, I had him as a player, although I had no idea who he was, and that was early in my career also. But I seeked him out, and I forget how I got a hold of him, quite frankly, but I got a hold of him and said I'm going to be in Miami certain day. We had lunch, and we had been close friends ever since then. Like I said, he wrote the forward to my book. It's very sad that Billy left us, and I was very close to him, and he did a lot of good. And so I want to mention that. I'm sorry, I wanted to mention that Billy. Uh, he passed away, and we honor him. And there's going to be a celebration of life coming up this weekend that I'll be at. And I just want to give a shout out to a guy that really made a difference.
Dale, that was well put. That was I can tell we can all tell how moved you were by that. It's not easy. It is not easy, saying goodbye to someone. And that brings us to Jim Joyce. Jimmy, you wanna talk about moves?
Yeah, we all lost a former umpire, major league umpire Larry Pansino, who was affectionately known as Moose Belush. He had several nickname monikers, and to put it quite bluntly, Larry Pansino was a character. Uh, he If you can think of Ralph Cramden on The Honeymooners, for your young people that don't remember that, Google it, because that's kind of like Larry's persona was kind of like Jackie Gleason in The Honeymooners, and he resembled a little bit John Belushi, where he got that was one of his first nicknames was Belush, and Actually, Larry and I, we weren't as close as we were in the major leagues because we spent a lot of times in the minor leagues. Larry and I put a lot of time in the minor leagues. We worked together quite a bit in the Pacific Coast League, and Larry was a very good friend, and unfortunately, he had an illness, and it was for quite a while, and he finally succumbed to it. I believe he was at the age of 66, I believe. And our thoughts and prayers go out to his wife Joanne, and his mom. Believe it or not, his mom Anna Maria is still alive, and it's hard to lose a a son or a daughter. And Anna Maria's got to be close to in her 90s, and so our thoughts and prayers go out to the Poncino family and to Joanne, and we just honor him. That's all we can do. And
Jimmy, your camera went out.
Your video's off, but we
Yeah,
can
your
still hear you.
video's off.
oh well, damn.
But I think you look better that way, actually.
I don't know what happened.
I don't know. We might
He
want to
may
improve
agree.
this podcast to just have you out of there.
Oh, gee.
Yeah, really.
Seriously though, Ponce was said it perfectly. He was a character. They broke the mold.
Yes, absolutely.
With Ponce, and it's at times you would just kind of look at him and think, well, did you really say that? But he was a very unique individual, and he will be missed. But guess who we have today? Bob, did you want to introduce? You want us to introduce?
Well, why don't you guys introduce her? You know Kathy better than I do, and it's a pleasure to meet you, Kathy. It really is. I think this could be fun.
Very excited about today. Our guest is Kathy Davis. Now, Kathy was for a long time with the National League. What year did you start with the National League?
Actually, I was hired on this day in 1978.
Wow, really? On this day, we're recording this on September 11th.
September 11th, which is a very somber day, but
right.
It's also the day that I was hired by Chuck Feeney.
Chuck Feeney, but just sidebar, this is also my parents' 63rd wedding anniversary of September 11th.
And my sister-in-law's, I'm not going to give her age because she'll get mad at me, but it's her birthday today too. So,
and you know who else it is?
We got it all figured
Brody.
out. Actually, it's not 63rd. It's 67th. My bad, because I'm 65. That would have been a little cool. But
and it's Shooter's son's birthday today.
And okay, so I mean, a lot going on in 9/11. But anyway, Kathy, you started in '78 with the National League. 78. American League, National League were separate, but Jimmy and I were both American League umpires. We had heard of Kathy, really didn't know her, but when we combined in 2000, when both the American National League umpire staffs combined and we're working under the umbrella of the commissioner's office, Kathy took what her job in the National League and basically just evolved into what she did for all of us in Major League Baseball under the commissioner's office. She was our I don't know what the right title. I don't want to say secretary. You're much more than that. I mean, you were Kathy our godmother.
Kathy was our den mother.
What's that?
Kathy was a specialist.
Yes, she was a specialist.
Kathy Davis is the only person in Major League Baseball that did so much they couldn't pin it down to just one thing, like Major League umpire or head of player relations. Or Kathy Davis was considered quote unquote specialist.
Well, she was such a specialist. When she retired, they had to have three people do what she did as one person.
Exactly.
So there you have it.
Exactly. I just have a small list here. She was, I read the other day, because I actually looked you up. You're famous. You're on the internet and you're on Google, and is it
for reasons I care not to?
No, not those. I'm not going to bring those up, but you correct me if I'm wrong on some of the 39 years with the National League and Major League Baseball.
Correct.
That's huge. That's huge. And literally her title was specialist because administrator just didn't do it. But most importantly about Kathy is if an umpire ever had a problem, she was our number one contact. she basically set up everything, meetings, everything like that during the off season. And the very first person you went to see when you went down to Arizona for our annual meetings was Kathy Davis. You didn't even bother go seeing the other umpires. The very first thing you did was you went to Kathy's room and you saw Kathy first to check in, and Kathy made sure that everybody was there and such. And she was our problem solver. She was the very first person that you called for advice. When my dad passed away, I was in my bedroom just off of here, and my brother called me and told me my dad had passed away. And after I got done with my brother, the next person I called was Kathy Davis because I was on vacation. I said, Kathy, my dad died. This is a direct quote. I'm so sorry to hear that, Jimmy. Go, go, go. And she hung up. That was it.
Yeah.
I don't need to know the particulars. I'll get those later. Jimmy, you just got to do what you need to do. She handled travel problems, hotel problems, team problems, airline problems, umpire. If our gear didn't show up or if it was in transit, Kathy, how many times did you have to deal with that? I mean, that was just amazing. She handled all payroll problems.
Per diem.
I remember just one other thing, and then I'm going to let Kathy. We'll finally let her speak. After the Galarraga thing, I was traveling, and I was on an airline, and the flight attendant, when I got on the plane, I was actually with Kay at the time. We were actually headed back east, and the male flight attendant basically announced to the plane that I was the umpire sitting in first class that had made the mistake in the Galarraga game. And he told everybody. And Kay looked at me and I said, I don't know what to do. So when we landed in Chicago, I called Kathy and Kathy told me, she says, I will get a hold of my United person and I will find out what's going on. She goes, because nobody's going to mess with one of my umpires. That's the kind of person that Kathy Davis was. And she was our knight in shining armor.
She was our tiger mom.
You guys know that.
She's a badass.
Oh, without a doubt.
Kathy, in a synopsis, kind of explain what your job was with us. Once we combined the National League, American League, and how you like. First of all, the first thing I think of is all our trunks and all our stuff that has to be moved. For people to understand, you have 15 crews working, let's say on a Wednesday night. Okay, there's 15 games maximum. The next day, all 15 of those crews are in a different city. And all the trunks, all of our trunks of equipment and uniforms. We had our plate equipment. We had uniforms for cold weather, warm weather. We had base shirts, base hats, plate hats, base shoes, plate shoes. I mean, all that is in this one big trunk. That was a real thrill to move with when you're in AAA and had to move them. Like the sky cabs at the airports, they'd run away when they saw you pulling these things out because they didn't want anything to do with them. But in the big leagues, they are air freighted. There's been several companies that have done that throughout the years, but they're air freighted. So when I leave, or Jimmy and I are on a crew and we leave Chicago on Wednesday night and fly into Philadelphia on Thursday and go to the ballpark Thursday night, our stuff is there. It's all unpacked. The clubhouse guy has done it. But to get those trunks, 15 crews, 4 trunks a crew, 2 to 3, sometimes 4 times a week would have to be moved around. Plus you had vacation umpires that had to get their trunks to wherever they were coming back off vacation. All of that. That right there, that's just one job. It's a huge job. That right there is what Kathy coordinated. And tell us about that. Just tell us some of the stories of what happened with those and what you had to do about it.
Well, I'll start off with a very funny story. Charlie Relaford, who is now one of the supervisors at Major League Baseball and was an umpire, and they have the umpire camps that they do now that I help start. And Charlie likes to tell this funny story about me and trunks. One time the crew was on the same plane and I don't know where they were going, what was going on. And they're sitting on the plane and it's pouring rain out. And he looks out the window and their trunks are sitting on the tarmac in the pouring rain. Now, these trunks are similar to what you would take to college. You know, the kids' trunks or to camp or something like that. Obviously bigger, a little different in configuration, but out of basically the same material. Obviously, they're not waterproof. And so Charlie gets on the phone and calls me up. And I said, "What's up?" Because I'm sitting on the plane and our trunks in the pouring rain are sitting on the tarmac. I said, "Give me 2 minutes." And I hung up the phone and I called the company and I got them on the phone and not so many nice terms. I said, "Get those goddamn trunks off the tarmac." Charlie calls me back 3 minutes after I get off the phone. Charlie calls me back 5 minutes later and said, "We just saw the trunks going up into the plane." It was a very large job. I mean, you know, the teams would fly on charters. You guys don't fly on charters. The trunks don't fly on charters. So it's a coordination between the schedule that we had for each of the crews, the company that we used at the time, and then their contacts and that their airlines that they use to make sure that we would get the trunks, you know, after a night game, they would get picked up that night. The umpire room attendant would throw the bags, the stuff in the bags right after you got off the field. The trunks would get picked up by the company, by the trucker, and then delivered to the airport. Most of the time they didn't go out to the next morning, and they'd have to be on the first flight out. So it was a coordinated effort also with our umpire room attendants to make sure they knew when they were coming in. So I set up a whole thing where the company that was shipping them had direct contact with all the umpire room attendants to let them know exactly when the trunks were coming in, when the club could expect them. And so it was a big concerted effort to get it there. Did we have failures? Yes. We had umpires on the field earlier in the early 2000s with jeans on and
Yes.
stuff like that. Yeah, you remember those stories.
Yeah.
And so it never, not always worked perfectly because you were at the mercy of the airline. So I was constantly getting what flights they would be on, hopefully, when they would be picked up, when they would be delivered, and work it that way to try and get it done. So it was a 24-hour-a-day job.
Now remember, folks, this is just one thing.
Yeah.
This is just one thing. And Kathy, weren't you and well, I know Mark was involved, Mark Latan, who was our but weren't you the one that went to Mark Latan and said, "Why don't we put uniforms in all the clubhouses? And if this does happen, that we could just go to," they actually sent a full umpire gear bag to every locker room. And if our uniforms didn't show, we actually went to this trunk and we had, you know, we had the black shirts, the blue shirts, the gray pants. We had umpires gear in every single one of them. And didn't you coordinate with Mark on that one where you guys got together and brainstormed that one?
Yes, Mark and I worked together with Honig's to get an extra trunk into each ballpark with hopefully what you guys need based on the basic numbers that we had on what sizes everyone had.
Right.
Yeah.
And those trunks.
It was suggested at one point with someone at MLB in the finance department because I did all the bills. So I did Hertz, I did American Airlines, which was all the different, you all had a special card. I did all the airline bills. I did all the Hertz bills. I did all of the your personal expenses. I did all of the bills for the cars and everything like that. So when the gentleman came to me one day, because I approved them all, they were signed off, and then they went down to finance. He came up to me one day. It's one of my funnier remarks, and he said, "Well, we're spending all this money shipping their gear. You know, it's an exorbitant amount of money." Meanwhile, what he didn't realize is that we had a CBA with the umpires. So we had to be doing all this. And he said, "Well, can't we just put There are uniforms in every ballpark. And this way we don't have to have trunks. And I looked at him,
I
I
remember
said,
that.
do you remember that? And I said to him, do you know how much one trunk worth of their equipment costs? Let alone the fact that umpires are very particular about several things. They're particular about their face mask. They are, which they should be. They're particular about their chest protector, their knee pads, their plate shoes, and everything else. I said, do you know how much each of those trunks cost? And I gave him the figure. I think at the time it may have been $2,000 or $3,000. And I said, so multiply that by, at this point we had 76 umpires. I don't know how I survived. And multiply that by the major league stadiums. So you're talking millions of dollars to put trunks in each of the ballpark. And where do you put everything? They don't have that space. You're
Yes.
lucky. No. I said, you're lucky umpires have nice locker rooms.
Yeah.
Which
Or a
Texas
locker room.
didn't for a long time. Now they do. And he looked at me and he said, okay. And he walked away with the bill.
Yeah.
And so
I actually remember you telling me that conversation about how they had come up with the idea to put, and all I could envision is like a Nordstrom's rack where they would
yes,
they would put 65 or 70 uniforms hanging there. It just made no sense at all. And
well, and he goes, well, they can carry the other stuff with them. And I said, excuse me? I said, what are you talking about? And it was like, and also, just to say a couple of things, it was that, and I don't mean to begrudge anyone or anything, but I think that what you guys appreciated most about me, if I may say, is the fact that I always, as you said, had your back.
Absolutely.
Oh,
so
yeah.
If anyone said anything bad about you, whether you were right or wrong, I would be there defending you.
Exactly.
And now when they were really, really wrong, I would tell them.
Oh yeah.
But I wouldn't admit it to anyone else.
But Kathy,
why don't you get behind the plate and you call the balls and strikes?
Yeah. Well, no, but and you're absolutely right. And in the vast offices on Park Avenue, now they're on something else, but where you worked, where the MLB was, very few people knew what we did or how we survived on, during this. And very few people understood what really happened in the umpire department and how we did our job and how any of this happened. Like that story just said, when this guy comes down, well, can't we save money if we do this? And when you point out to him, this is what's happening, then they understand. I mean, a funny story that you and I laugh about, I put it in my book, was when I was going to Australia in early 2014, and you were working with Baseball International, who was working on the flights and hotels and the logistics of getting umpires and their +1, which didn't have to be a spouse, but we could bring a guest and you would put in and Dale Scott would like a reservation. He'd like and at the hotel he'd like Michael Roush is going with him and the ticket and that, and he would like to have a king size bed in the hotel. And didn't you tell the story? But somebody from International contacted you.
So what it was, I had to give him a list of all the manifest of the umpires and the rooms and and this and that, slash the wife or whatever it is, Jim Joyce and Kay Joyce, whatever it is. And so it came time and I put Dale Scott and Michael Roush, and I sent it to this young lady, and she calls me and she goes, okay, I got the manifest for the hotels. Dale Scott, you put a king, isn't it double? I said, no, king. Well, double. I said, no, king. And at this time, Dale had not come out yet.
No, I came out later that year. Yeah.
We all knew for years.
Right.
Actually, when he did come out, I called him up and said, oh my God, you're gay. And, and I said, no.
We all did that.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Dude, I thought I was the only one. And I said, no, it's a king. No, it's a double. I said, it's a king. And finally she said, "Oh," and she hung up the phone. And I'm like,
Baseball International just got schooled.
Yes.
well, that was one of the many times. I think you would get in the elevator. The best part was getting in an elevator after a game, coming up to the office or going out for lunch, and there would be a call or a ball strike or something like that, and blah 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 blah, and people would get me and say, "Oh yeah, ho ho ho, did you see that one?" I said, "Do you want to get behind the plate and do 200 and something squats a game? Do you want to go to first base and try it? Knock your socks off. Until you can do that, don't say anything to me."
Yeah,
People
yeah.
don't.
You protected. You are a protector.
Oh,
You know,
absolutely.
and it was,
You don't mess with the mama bear.
No.
and, and the other thing was, well, they're off for a couple of months and they get vacation. I said, okay, do you know how they travel? And then I'd say they finish the game, and depending on if it's a night game, they can't fly out till the next day. So they get back to the hotel room at like midnight. They don't get to bed till 1 or 2 in the morning because you can't go right to sleep. And then they have to get up to make the first flight out to get to the next city, which is a couple of hours away. And they do that every 3 or 4 days. Sometimes they're lucky that they can work New York, LA, Anaheim, Oakland, San Francisco, Chicago. I said, but that's what they do. And so after a day game, they're getting on a plane, they're going straight to the airport, they're hoping that they make that flight, because if not, you don't know if you have another flight for a couple hours, and then they're going to the next city.
That's
You know,
fair.
You tell me how easy their job is.
And
You
the
know,
funny
traveling-
thing about it is the casual person out there always thought that we literally worked in our hometowns.
Yeah.
They always thought we just worked. I worked in Beaverton or Portland, and
I still
and
get those
such, and
questions from people.
they had no idea that we were on the. I mean, Kathy can verify this. There were times that we'd be on the road for 56 straight days. And and I'm not complaining about it. It's just that Kathy was the one that actually knew this, and she defended us on this. And not many people realize that we traveled as much as we did. And Kathy had the sense. The very first person you would talk to about travel was Kathy, because she knew exactly what we went through. So
Well,
I remember we were not San Francisco, we were in Kansas City for the 2012 All-Star game.
I just used my bag the other day.
Yeah. And of course we're all there a couple days before and stuff like that. And we saw the team bus for I think it was the American League team bus, was actually headed to the ballpark for workouts and stuff like that. And they had police escorts and everything like that. Well, we had gone to the ballpark that's what it was for the home run derby. And the team bus had gone and they had police escorts, and then the National League, they had team escorts. Well, we get on a bus and it takes us an hour and a half to get to the ballpark because of traffic in Kansas City. So we came back that night, and Kathy was standing in the lobby, and I kind of walked up to her and I said, "Kathy, I don't want to make a big deal about this." I said, "But tomorrow night for the game, when we leave for the game, it took us an hour and a half to get to the ballpark from downtown Kansas City. It's not that long of a ride." I said, "And the other team, but they have police escorts to get us through there." Kathy goes, "I got it. I'm on it." That next day, we had a 12 motorcycle police escort to the ballpark. And I just said, "That's Kathy Davis right there."
Did you guys feel like rock stars with that 12 motorcycle?
We usually get some police escorts in some of the cities anyway, but this one was totally different. This one was motorcycles, and these guys were hot rods. They were really good on their bikes, and
they were just showing off.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But that's it. We were talking about the logistics of the regular season and their trunks and that kind of stuff, and everything that goes on there. But when you worked a special event, when you worked the All-Star game, any of the playoffs, or World Series, or like I alluded to the Australia, when I got to open up in Australia, which was such a thrill. But once again, Kathy's the one that took care of that, and you just pointed out one of those things. If there was, when I was going to a special event, or a playoff or something, we would get all the information. I mean, it was so wrapped up perfectly. I mean, we could just be brain dead, which a lot of times we were, and she she would be able to just get. I mean, we like for
I love
example
you though.
for the All-Star game. There's the home run derby. We get so many tickets as a working umpire for the game itself. We also get so many tickets for the home run derby. We have family, we have friends coming in.
Yeah.
Kathy, she's the one that she's the point person. She's the one that would. How many people do you need? For the home run derby, I need 8. Okay, boom, boom, boom. And I mean, we would be lost or spending all of our time scrambling around trying to figure things out. And that's we're there to do something else. We're there. It's to umpire, and it's especially when playoffs and stuff. There's a lot of stuff going on, but she's the one that would be the point person. And if you had a situation like Jimmy was talking about, you tell Kathy, and that situation was taken care of. I remember, Jimmy, you were mentioning how much we traveled during the season. I mean, a team is home half the schedule.
Right.
Even if you and I, Jimmy and I, Portland guys, but even if we lived in Seattle, we may get there twice a year.
Yeah.
If you're lucky 3 times. I mean, and sometimes none or one. And I'm talking, when I say one, I mean 3 games or 6 games. When we were in the American League, we got there a little more often because there were less teams that were working. You might get there 4 or 5 times, but still, we're talking about 12 games max, maybe for a season.
Yeah.
So even if you live in a big league city, you're not going to get there very often, and so you're just constantly on the road. Again, not complaining. That's just facts. Yes. So you need someone that you can lean on when stuff isn't going right. I have a funny story. You'll remember this, Kathy. We called you. We had a simple after a night game in DC, a simple direct flight to Cincinnati. There were 3. It was a regional airline. There were only 3 flight nonstops. There was one like at 6 a.m, one at 10 a.m, one at 2 p.m.
Delta.
So we took the 10 o'clock. We had a backup at the 2. Just really it's I don't know, an hour flight, if that. I mean, it was an easy trip. So I'm there with the crew waiting for our flight. They come on. They said, "Well, when your aircraft landed, it blew a tire, so we got to get a tire on. So we're going to be a little late." Okay, fine. And then it was a little late. And then, now we're looking around at each other. So then we looked into the 2 o'clock flight. Well, it was booked. It was, overbooked. So now we're looking, luckily Cincinnati, you could go to Louisville, you could go to Indianapolis, Columbus. We're looking at all kinds of options now as they're still delay. They keep pushing back the time. Finally, we said we gotta pull the trigger here. So we got on the horn, got a flight to Louisville, got a car. Long story short, we landed in Louisville, drove like bats out of hell. Usually we get to the ballpark at 5 o'clock about 5:15 for a 7 o'clock game. We pulled not to the hotel or anything. We went directly to the stadium. We pulled in at 5:30. And like walked in, we made it. But we weren't sure if we would. And about 2 minutes before, our supervisor, Randy Marsh, who lived there, walked in, and he had no idea that the day we just went through. But when we called Kathy, we said, "Kathy, you're going to get a rental car from Louisville. You're going to get a airlines from DC to Louisville. We haven't lost our mind. This is what's happening." And she immediately, boom, boom, boom. She knew what was going on. Do you remember that, Kathy? I mean, we were sweating it out if we we're going to make it to that game in time.
Yep.
You're the one we contact because you're the one that does, logistics, and you're the one that gets all the bills.
Well, I think that the one thing that I prided myself on is, and what I was thought about was, your job is to get on the field and umpire a game, leave everything else to me.
Yep. Well, there you have it. I mean, and that's exactly, especially.
Guys, I'll be right back.
Especially the like the playoffs and stuff. You got a lot on your mind, I mean, there's a lot of, people are lying. Umpires are lying if they say there's no pressure. Okay. And it's how, you deal with it better as you get more experience, but it's still there. But the last thing you need to do is trying to deal with tickets for your family or your friends, or trying to, figure out transportation, like Jimmy had talked earlier, because it's you're in a city that is going to be tough traffic wise or whatever. that's what Kathy was for. And she would take care of that. And that's a burden off your shoulders as an umpire that you just don't have to deal with.
Right.
You don't know how important that is until you don't have it. when you don't have it, you go, oh my goodness, I got to do this on my own. And this is, there's a lot of logistics, a lot of moving parts. And so that's why you were phenomenal at it. And I people might think we're kidding, but when you retired, they had 3 people to take your job.
It was more like 5, but I won't say
5. Well,
I don't know how I did it. Sometimes I was very good at multitasking. That was probably the best that I did.
yeah.
Because I was very good at multitasking.
Oh, very well.
And I don't know how I did it. I went from 24 umpires at the National League. Yeah, it was like 24 umpires at the National League. And then it was like 40 something, 24 and 28. So was it like 52 when I took over in 2020? And when I retired, I had 76 major league umpires.
Right.
And that was the staff umpires. You dealt with the AAA guys too. They were coming up and down.
Well, I had the AAA call-ups. Then I did the observers who would be at games. I did all of their
Right.
expense reports and stuff. The supervisors, I did all their expense reports or when they had problems with stuff. So it was a lot.
I'm
Kathy,
sorry
you
about
had
it,
all-
but I had an alarm going off. Sorry about that. I didn't know if you heard it or not, but there was
No.
everything's okay. I just yelled down to Kay to make sure everything was okay. So I'll find out about that later. So sorry about leaving you, Kathy.
No,
Yeah,
it's
well,
okay. I mean,
if we see somebody coming and to take you away, we'll tell your story.
Or if you hear sirens.
yes, there you go.
Kathy,
you
with
know,
all these personalities with these umpires, each umpire had a personality. How was that going forward, working with all these guys? I mean, you had Dale and Jimmy who were pretty easygoing, but I know there's umpires that, have a little more
Nah.
handle with care.
Yeah, they are type A personalities. It's only black and white. There's no gray because it's only safe or out, ball or strike. Am I right, guys?
No,
Absolutely.
yeah. Herding cats was one of the better ways of describing
It's one
it.
of the better lines, and yes, I am a cat lady. And so it took a while. I think what it boiled down to, Bob, is a mutual respect.
That's what I was
My
trying to get
dad-
at. I'm sure all these guys respected you, even though they had different personalities. They knew you had a hard job to do, and I'm sure there were times when they kind of got on your case a little bit, but I'm sure you had to set them and say, "Hey, look, I'm doing the best I can. We're going to get this right." You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, there were some that were easier than others and still are. I think it was mutual respect. My dad always taught me respect others as you expect them to respect you. And in several instances, that wasn't there for a while until I had to set boundaries.
But the
And
respect, but
the answer was, yes, I can do that. No, I can't. And then they would say, well, you can't. I said, I have a collective bargaining agreement. This is what it says, and this is what I have to stick to. Now, there were many cases where I would stretch it as far as I could. In instances, I would go to superiors and say, I'm stretching it. And if they said no, then the answer was no. But I think that the guys respected me more for being honest with them than not. And I think
absolutely.
that's, I said to them, I always said to you guys, you know what? I will never lie to you. I will always tell you the truth. If I can do it, I can do it. If I can't, I can't. And this is what it is. And I'll try and get it done because I know what your job is. So I think overall, yes, there's certain personalities that were easier to deal with others. I could sit on a phone for 20 minutes laughing with some. And then there were others that they just didn't get it. So you had to deal with them more on a business level than on a personal level. And
Well,
I think that's what a lot of what the difference could be. Do
I
you agree with
remember
me,
a few
guys?
phone calls that you were laughing in your area there in Park Avenue, and then after you get off the phone, somebody would say, Kathy, who the hell was that? I mean, what's going on there? Because you and I would just be for 10 minutes laughing.
Hysterical.
Well,
Hysterical.
Kathy. It was very. Kathy was part of our family. You know, and there weren't many guys out there that were working that ever didn't think that, because Kathy literally was part of our family. She knew our kids, she knew all their names, she knew our wives' names. You know, she was just so good at that stuff, and she was easy to work with. But like she says, if you crossed the line, Kathy knew where to draw the line, and she did it very diplomatically. It was never a shouting match or anything like that. And I know there's been times that somebody'd say, well, Kathy did this. Well, that's her job. You guys can't have everything you want. And I can remember, if you crossed that line with me, at least, and complained about Kathy, I let them know it. And because that's how much we loved Kathy, to be very honest with you, because she was part of our family.
And
Well, there were a few shouting matches, believe me.
yeah.
Well,
and you would think umpires who have to enforce the rules, just like Kathy has a collective bargaining agreement, where we had a collective bargaining agreement that she had to maneuver in, and there's some things in that bargaining agreement that we would ask for. I can't do that. That's not in, and you would think umpires would understand that, because we do the same thing out on the field.
Right.
You may not like it, but this is the rule. I'm sorry. This is how it happens. But people, we're like kids. We like to stretch a little bit and see what we get away with.
I was just going to say that you're like little kid. You're like little kids, but mommy, I want to do that. But honey, you can't. Why? Because I said so. I mean, it's that kind of thing. I mean, yes, it was.
But you had that respect from everybody. Like, when we were brainstorming a few months ago, your name was one of the first that came up. I don't remember who brought it up. It was Dale or Jimmy, but they went, yes, we got to get her on. She's got stories, and she will be a great guest, and she can explain a little of all the crap that goes on getting you guys from point A to point B, and everything else in between. And you got to take your hat off to you. That's a hell of a job to do, for almost 40 years.
Kathy was actually affectionately known in some regards. Kay brought it up the other night. We were talking about having Kathy on, and so she had asked me if we're doing this today, and I said, well, third time's a charm, so I'm sure we'll get it done. and Kay used to say to me, it's a good thing you have somebody like Kathy, or nothing would ever get done. She is like your den mother. And
that's what I was.
And I said, you know what? You're exactly right. Because if it wasn't for her, it would be total chaos.
Kathy.
And when people ask me what I did, I would say I'm their den mother.
Yeah. Executive Vice President den mother. Kathy, you're 78. You started.
Yes.
You were obviously there when we combined leagues and everything went under the commissioner's office and the inner workings of that, and until you retired. I think, did we retire the same year, or maybe it was a year after?
I retired in 17.
17, that was my last year, because
it was your last year. Yeah.
So my question is, though, can you kind of relate to us how the game changed, how your interaction with umpire, or maybe it didn't change, I don't know, but how the interaction with umpires back in 78, back in the 90s, before we went under the commissioner's office, and then going forward, was there a lot of obviously you had to deal with different CBAs every 5 years or whatever, things would change or whatever, but just was there anything that was a lot easier to do that was tougher, or a lot tougher to do that than it turned out to be easier, or just the attitudes or the inner office? Because one thing, when the National League and American League, that used to be kind of a rivalry between the leagues. All of a sudden, we're under the commissioner's office. That was a whole different thing. Is there anything you can expand on that?
I think that as we started in 78, and I didn't work with the umpires in 78, I was in PR. But we were only 6 people in the office. So the young lady, Josephine, that took care of the umpires, I would fill in if she was on vacation or something like that. I think that it got more involved as years went on. It was like, I don't know if they were respected as much as they could have been. I think it was like the umpires and they're working and it's like, okay. And yeah, in Montreal, you have to, you used to, when we went to Montreal, I think might be the same with Toronto, is you would take your gear with you and then you would pick it up at the other end and then someone would get it from you and bring it to the ballpark, at least in Montreal. Toronto might have been different. And it was like, yeah, they'll get there. Yeah, they're flying. Yeah, blah, 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 blah. I think that as we progressed with baseball and as we progressed with umpires, I think the respect and the actual understanding of how difficult a job it was became more relevant. It
in the
became
office,
much
you
more.
mean, from people in the office? You mean?
Yes. I think that the job that I did got more complicated as we merged. And we brought in, we had brought in a bunch of clubs in the 90s in the National League and the American League. I think that the mentality of people changed about umpires. You finally were thought of as people that had families, because going back when I started, I don't think the guys got home at all. They never got home
No.
unless they were in that city.
Yeah.
A lot of them, I remember God bless Ed Vargo, who taught me everything I knew, who was a National League umpire and then a supervisor of our umpires. He never got home for a couple of his kids' births.
Yeah.
Because that's not what umpires did. Umpires stayed out on the road.
We were kind of like Dale and I are kind of like at the end of that. We're kind of like the ones that kind of that was like the dividing line when Dale and I came up. That was where we were half this way, and then the good stuff happened after we got to the big leagues.
Yeah, and I'm not gonna say it was the CBA that did it. I'm although things evolved where you're getting more and more, but travel and everything was getting more complicated. I think it was the mentality and the mindset of people that changed.
Yeah, there's no doubt
to really grow.
There is no doubt that in 2000, when we went to the commissioner's office, suddenly we were way more corporate than we were before that.
Oh, absolutely.
And there was animosity on both sides at that point.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Which people may not remember with your union and everything.
Oh,
which
yeah.
we don't have to go into.
No, but no.
I remember we had meetings and there were almost fistfights at the first couple of years.
Yeah, yes. There was a lot of issues that had to be worked through and worked out, and some of them didn't even as guys retired in the early in the 2000s.
Yes,
is when we started getting a little bit, because there were certain guys that just were not going to accept
exactly
what had happened,
right, and the whole thing. So that had a lot to do with it also. As American
League umpires and finally transitioning into under the commissioner's office, I don't think it took the American League umpires too much time to figure out that Kathy Davis is on our side, because it was pretty much instantaneous.
Well, I knew a couple of them. I knew John Hirschbeck very well.
Yeah.
Through Mark, who was our National League umpire.
Right.
And I saw, that point we had an office next door to each other. So I had seen a Richie Garcia, or I had seen, I can't even remember. I think a lot of it was that kind of thing, because when Mark's first son was sick, I did a lot with his insurance, and Mark was a National League umpire. So some of you knew who I was.
Right.
And I'm sure you heard from some of your guys on how I took care of the National League guys.
Well,
absolutely. Absolutely.
Tess gave me a good reference to you.
Yes, she did. She did. Tess was the young lady that did the American League umpires.
Did the American League guys.
Because I went to her because I was taking over the American League guys as well. And so I think everyone was at that point was suspicious of everything, because all of a sudden we were merged together. And remember, they got rid of our 2 league offices. Yeah. So some people lost their jobs. They said that the commissioner's office could do what we did, and we were double dipping on things. And to this day, I don't think they still can do what we did.
No.
in the space of those two offices. So there was a lot of kind of feeling people out, but that's not my personality. As you know, I'm just kind of like, hi, I'm here. I'm here to take care of you, blah, 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 blah. And so, but I think other people's perception of you and respect for you increased over that time. And I think that's the biggest thing. But the game of baseball changed. When I came in, they were owned by families. The
Yeah.
Wrigleys, the O'Malleys, the Carpenters in Philadelphia, Dave Roulette in New York. I mean, name it. Now it's more corporate than it ever
Yeah.
was. And that's another changing factor that had a lot to do with the landscape of baseball, is that it got out of family owned and the money started flowing, and things changed as well in the world of baseball.
Yeah,
Yeah,
one
that
of
was
the
a
things
that was a
really
difficult time
amazed
for a lot of
me-
people.
Yes.
Yeah,
know.
one of the things that really amazed me about you, Miss Davis, is, and if we ever had an incident, whether it was good, bad, or indifferent, it really didn't matter what the incident was. And the thing about it was cell phones were, not real prevalent at the time. I mean, we didn't do everything by cell phone.
No.
It was just like an emergency thing at that time. If we called Kathy, I can vividly remember never Kathy ever saying, call me and remind me. That never happened,
Oh.
folks. If you gave Kathy an incident or a request or a problem or whatever, Kathy would always say to you, I'll get back to you very, very soon. There was never any, and I'm just letting you know, people, that we do so much by these now
Yeah.
that it wasn't like that with Kathy. You gave Kathy one phone call, Kathy would call you back. And I know those type of people are not very prevalent anymore, because I'm one of them. I always say, if I do some things for Alms Care, and when I'm talking to Jen, I always tell Jen, please remind me, just because I'm not very thick. Okay. So, but Kathy was never like that. And I'm just, kind of patting you on the back for that, because there's not many people that are like that. And
Thank
we
you.
also
it's amazing
have
how you did your job for as long as you did, and how well you did it.
And no one wanted me to
no
leave.
doubt.
And I'm like, you're out of your minds. I got to get out of here.
We certainly can't let this podcast go without mentioning this story, Kathy.
Okay.
It was right after, I think it was 2003, I want to say. So we had combined with I was now a crew chief. We had combined under the commissioner's office. I was in Washington, D.C. at old RFK Stadium. We had a Saturday
my
game of the week. I believe the Yankees were there.
Mhm.
And during the game we had a rain delay, and it came down pretty good. It was a Saturday afternoon game. Rich Reeker, who was one of our supervisors, happened to be at the game that weekend, or was observing us that weekend. And so we had a pretty good deluge, and now it's slowed down, and I was crew chief, so I'm out on the field talking to the groundskeeper. I'm talking, Rich Reeker was out there. And apparently the announcer, Kathy, was at a bowling tournament.
I was at a bowling tournament in Rochester, New York.
So there, unbeknownst to me, Fox or whoever, the Saturday game, they say, oh, there's we're it looks like the rain stopped and they're taking the tarp and they're whatever, and there's the crew chief Dale Scott down there, and he's on the phone. I'm sure he's talking to the meteorologist to see what the what the forecast is and stuff. I had Rich Reeker's phone. He goes, hey, I'm talking to Kathy. You want to talk to her? So he hands me the phone. So I'm talking to Kathy, who's in Rochester, or wherever the hell she was at a bowling tournament. And we're laughing about God knows what we're talking about. And unbeknownst to, it was all on air. It was all on TV. I mean, and they were saying that they're giving me all these kudos, like, well, the crew chief, that's what they do. They want to make sure that the forecast and blah, blah, blah. And I'm going, hey, Kathy, how you bowling? Hey, did you have a kamikaze? I mean, that's fun when you're bowling to have a
I remember that. I actually remember that. I think I was up there, but that's when I bowled a lot. I was up there at the tournament, and I think I might have called Rich, because I don't know why Rich would call me. And I'm like, yeah, what's going on? I mean, And he's like, well, we have a rain delay. We're out on the field. I said, oh my God, because RFK Stadium was horrible, if I remember.
Right, it was.
For all that, right? And he goes, here, talk to Dale. We're out on the field. And I'm like, hi. And then we found out that you were on TV. Yeah, I remember that. Oh my God.
Well, it's better to look like
That
you're
was
doing
so
something
funny.
than actually be doing it. So yeah.
Kathy,
Well, actually, I was probably a better meteorologist than a lot of people.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
might have been. You might
Without
have
a
been.
doubt. Kathy, did you have more interaction with Bud Selig or with Rob Manfred, the commissioner now? Did you have more?
But Selig was never really in the office.
Oh, okay. I was just always wondering about that because I know, you know, certain things, especially if it was CBA, I know you would go to somebody first. And then I always wondered if, because I know that Manfred, Commissioner Manfred, was in labor at the time, meaning the labor attorney. And if it was a CBA issue, did you deal with Manfred or did you deal with you know, like Dan or
Steve Gonzalez or Dan or something? I've known Rob Manfred since before he was hired by Major League Baseball. When we had a problem with the CBA in the 90s, was it the Players? It might have been the Players. We were on one floor at 350 Park Avenue. So downstairs, 17 was the commissioner, 18 was the National League, the American League, and then the labor relations, which at the time was a player relations department. And they were all going out to lunch, and the young lady, Doreen, had lost her dad. And so I went over there. It was during a baseball strike, definitely. And I had gone over there to answer the phone. So I've known Rob since then, since before he was hired.
So that was about 94, that strike at
94, 95, somewhere in that neighborhood.
Yeah.
Was that one?
Yeah.
So I've known Rob since then. You know, I had some going back and forth with Rob over the years. I remember one time we were downstairs in our 245 Park and we're at Joe Torre's office, Peter, myself, and I forget who else. And we're talking to Joe, and Manfred pulls me aside and he goes, can I ask you a question? I'm like, oh, shoot, what's going on? Well, all he wanted to know is he wanted to know if Phyllis Marriage, Katie, or myself, who was the highest ranking. I was like number 3 at that point in there. And I come back up and Peter goes, what did he ask? What did he ask? What's going on? And I said, he asked me how many years I've been in baseball. And he goes, oh, so I did have interaction with him, but as he, you know, became Bud's surrogate and then became commissioner, it was mostly either Dan Halem or Steve Gonzalez or the female, oh my gosh, the lawyer, Casey.
Jennifer Connelly?
Casey.
Casey?
Yeah, Casey or something like that. So I didn't have a lot of run-ins with him. I mean, at that point, it was mostly with the lawyers that I would. I think earlier on before he was commissioner, yeah, I would have more, but I would always go to someone before I go to him. But if anything, they would come to me.
Yeah. That's what actually I was going to and going for is just to, because you really didn't have to quote unquote report to anybody, did you? I mean, your decision making was pretty much your decision making, but if it got
I mean,
crazy,
I had
crazy or
yeah, I mean, I had Mike Port, I had Ralph Nelson, Mike Port, Jimmy Lee, and I had Sandy. When Ralph left, I reported directly to Sandy. I was one of the only people that reported directly to an EVP, and I'm a specialist.
Okay.
I would report to Mike Port, you know, or whatever. But a lot of times the EVP of baseball operations, who was Joe, would come to me for things. Or I would go to Joe for things. It was very fluid. It wasn't, as Jimmy Lee, rest his soul, would say, you know, the line of command or whatever. I wouldn't have a problem with going to someone. Then I would go to Matt all the time and we'd go to Peter or something like that. I always did have someone except when Ralph left, and then I reported directly to Sandy for a long time. But they let me, I would say they let me do my thing most of the time.
Right.
They trusted me that I knew what I was doing, if I can be so bold as to say that. And they trusted, what my decisions were. And obviously, if it was borderline, I would actually, I would go right in and say, look, this is what the guys want to do. Like maybe driving a car or getting a limo. Like couple of times we had
Right.
cars take you to cities. Like I remember going to Pittsburgh one time and the guys being driven to Pittsburgh. Those kind of things I would say, yeah, that sounds fine. I would compare airlines. I would go to someone and say, can I do something like that?
Right.
So it was decision making on a lot of times, or just knowing that they trusted me to do things.
Absolutely. That's what I was. We
Yeah.
always knew that. We always knew that. And if you needed something done right away, though, it was Kathy Davis. So that's where I was actually going with that.
Yeah,
So.
yeah, yep. I would make a lot of the decisions, and
I was-
sometimes I would tell them after I made the decision. But
January 1st of 2018 was officially my retirement date, although I hadn't worked since April because I was hurt. But I remember, and you were out of the office then. 17 was your last year.
December.
About 10 days into January of me officially being retired, because I would have done this to you, but you were retired. I called Matt McKendry. I said, Matt, how you doing? He said, hey, Dale, good to hear from you. I said, yeah. I said, this has never happened before. I know Kathy's not there anymore, but I didn't get a per diem check. And he said, my check didn't come. And he said, Dale, do you understand what retirement means? I said, I thought I just didn't have to work anymore, but I still got paid. I don't understand. He said, well, obviously you don't. And I don't think Kathy could have cleared that up. So, but
Yeah.
you were certainly missed. I remember talking to some of the umpires that year, later on that year, the first year you were gone. And they said, man,
Yep.
something would come up or something. They said, I wish Kathy was still
Yep.
here because it would
I
get
spoiled
solved.
you. I spoiled you.
Yes,
But
that's true.
But you know what the nice thing is now, and Bob, I think maybe I talked to you about it and the guys know about it. I spend most of my time in Venice, Florida, on the West Coast near Sarasota. And the Atlanta Braves nicely built me a ballpark down there for spring training about 6 miles from my house in Northport.
Must be nice.
Can't get away from it.
It was lovely. It's a $140 million facility. It's gorgeous. And I started working there when they had their first game in 19, and I've been working there in spring training ever since. And when I went there and I applied for a job, the guy said to me, I just went to a call that they were hiring people. And I sat down with the guy, and the guy goes to me, he goes, so tell me about yourself. And I had written stuff out. They had asked questions and stuff. And I said, well, I worked for Major League Baseball for 39 years with the Major League umpires. And he goes, do you know? And he knew Jerry Davis. But they found out about me, and they did some background info on me. They had gone to a winter meetings and saw the RSAs. And they, said, oh, do you know Kathy Davis? Anyway, it came out great. So I've been working with the umpires also now after, and I work in the press box after COVID. But what I would do beforehand is I would make sure the guys know, and still do, how to get into the ballpark, where the dressing room is, what time they have to be on the field, et cetera, et cetera. And so I've been doing that since then, which has been wonderful. And I go down. The nice thing is, if you come to a game at the Atlanta Braves, when the umpires come to home plate, they look up and blow me a kiss, wave to me at every game. So I've kept myself in the game this whole time. So I'm still working with umpires. I don't go down there anymore, but the security knows where they go and what to do, and the guys know what to do, and they always come to me. It's like, do the umpires know this? Do the umpires know that? And that started when I started there in 19. So although I retired, umpires and baseball are not out of my blood.
Well,
and I do it to this day. And I work in the press box also. I oversee the press box for the club. I know a lot of the writers. A lot of baseball personnel come in every once in a while. I'll get a supervisor. I've seen Jeff Kellogg and Charlie over the years. So I still have my hand in the umpires. And I still watching guys come up. Most of the guys that I worked with are in the majors now. So that's been a nice thing that I'm still involved. And so I get this, God, we wish you were back.
Yeah.
Goodness, why aren't you back? I get it from umpire room attendants come to visit me if they're at the ballpark.
You
We
can't
wish you were
quit
still
us.
here.
You just can't quit
Yes.
us.
No, you know what? It's part of my DNA, I guess.
Yeah, well, that's nothing wrong with that. I I don't know. We're close to being out. I mean, I'm not
Right.
sure we're on time,
We're
Bobby,
close.
but I
We're
just
close.
another thing that I have to pass along, and we had such a great day was the New York World Pride Day parade in 2019, in June of
Oh,
2019, and you came and was on the MLB float with myself and Mike and Billy Bean, and
yep.
what a fun day that was, and I still to this day. And I told you this, and you agreed. I mean, I never thought that would ever happen, right? When I
Nope.
came into baseball, if somebody had said that you will be riding in an MLB float in the Gay Pride Parade, I would have said, "What are you smoking? That's not going to happen. That would never happen." But that was a fun day, Kathy, and you've always been
It
such a
it
great
was
supporter, and I
it
appreciate
was
that.
yeah. It was a long day because it was
Yes.
so, I mean,
Mm-mm.
it was unbelievable. But I saw there were some pictures of Billy on the float, and I don't know if they were from you or someone else, but I'm standing right in front of him. You can see the back of my head. Um, and also, we all got off after a while, and Mike took me into an establishment for a few minutes. Do you remember that?
Well, yeah, because there was such a delay to start. The parade was double the size for this World Parade thing, and it took forever to start. And so we're sitting there with all these other ones, and so Mike, who, he likes to, he likes to do what he does. He said, "Kathy, come on, let's go." And off you went to this little bar on the sidebar, and I said, "Where's Kathy?" And they come back, and they're a couple martinis in, but that was good. There's nothing wrong with that.
Kathy, it
was
sounds like you
probably
have a lot of little brothers in the umpires' brethren there. You're like their big sister. It's what it seems like with Dale and Jimmy. You kind of oversee them and lead them along, and guide them because, players and umpires, sometimes you can get clueless, especially if you're a first year player. What do we do? Where do we go? Where do we have to be? And you do a hell of a job. That I don't know how you did it, but you did it. That was awesome.
Yeah, I made a point. Well, first of all, they're all family. I still keep in touch with a lot of them, as Dale attests. My birthday, I get more phone calls and text messages from guys that still remember it, than I can ever imagine. But I think the biggest thing is, and one of the best things, besides the umpire camps, which I started with Rich Rieker, Mark Laton, and Chris Jones, and is still going strong to this day. Um, and Malachi Moore, who is a major league umpire, came out of one of our camps, is when umpires were finally promoted to the major leagues. I made an effort to make sure that they felt safe and they knew that I had them. Even though they knew me from the minor leagues, it was different once they got to the majors. I think they do it now, but I would sit them down and I would talk about their finances. I would tell them, I would give them suggestions on how to do their per diem and their paychecks and getting themselves a financial advisor and going into 401k and, their wives and whatever, and their insurance and all that kind of stuff. So I was a den mother, and I always wanted to make sure that they had nothing to worry about on the field about what goes on off the field. That the
And
only
there's
thing
a
that they had to worry about were the calls. And I think that was one of the most important things, and I think that that's what's gone along, along the time is how I dealt with all of them. You worry about the field, we'll worry about everything else.
Absolutely.
So
and
Jimmy,
I'll wrap it up with this real quick. There's
yes, sir.
and I'm sure that Kathy will remember this. I was working with a young umpire, and it had come to the time where they were going to select a new umpire to come to the major leagues. There was one job opening, one. And I was working with one of the contenders, and we were traveling from someplace to Colorado. I remember that. And We get off the plane, and it should have been announced about the time that we got off the plane on who was going to get the job between this one young umpire and this other young umpire. So we're walking to the train in the Colorado airport, and it takes you to the lobby, and I get a phone call, and it's Kathy Davis, and she says to me, "I just want to make sure of one thing. Will you please take care of so and so because he didn't get the job? Please, please watch out for him and just make sure that he's going to be okay." And we had the day off that day. And I said, "Kathy, thanks for the heads up. I really appreciate it." But that's the type of person that Kathy is. And she would have done that for anybody, not just one individual. And this individual finally did get a job, but it was that point in time in this young umpire's life that he could have been brushed aside and nobody really gave a rat's ass, but Kathy did. And she went through me, and I told him, eventually that, there are people that are watching out for you. So that's the kind of person that Kathy is, just to let you guys know.
You remember things that I don't remember that I did.
I remember that vividly, like it happened yesterday.
Because you did so much. That's why.
Yes, exactly. I mean, you can't remember everything.
Kathy, we appreciate you. We're near the end here. Thank you for coming on. You have been fascinating to pardon my voice. That's why I haven't talked much today. But you've been fascinating to talk to. We maybe have you on again sometime because we just scratched the surface. You were one of the first people Jimmy and Dale spoke about when we wanted to have somebody on, and I want to thank you for Jim, Dale, and myself for coming on, and we hope that people got something out of this because it's like you said, it's a business now, and there are so many components to it. People don't realize what goes on getting people from point A to point B, and trunks and everything else. And job well done from what Jimmy and Dale have told me. Job well done because it wasn't an easy job.
Well, it's my pleasure, and they're two of my favorites. Although there'll probably be a lot of other umpires that say, "I thought I was your favorite."
Of course,
it's a pleasure. I'd love to come on again if you would like to have me and talk more. I'm sure they will remember more stories than I do, but it's been an honor and a pleasure to see them. It's been an honor and a pleasure.
Well, thanks,
you, Kathy.
We really appreciate it. And Jimmy, got anything else to say?
Thank you very much for all you ever did for us, Kathy. It's much appreciated. I know you didn't get it should be more, but you know what? As far as Kay and I are concerned, I can't thank you enough.
Thank you, honey. My love to your wife.
Absolutely. And like I said earlier, when I came out and everything, you were right there. I mean, you were always my biggest supporter. And Michael, and for that I'm very, very grateful, and I thank you for that. So thanks for being on. We appreciate it. You've brought this podcast up a few notches in class.
Absolutely.
Well, I might be the prettier one.
Got to lower our standards now.
Well, Dale, please give Mike my love, and your mom, and to all of you and your families, my love and good health.
Thank you. Thank you.
Kathy, we appreciate having you on, and we will have her on again. She's Kathy Davis. He's Jimmy Joyce. He's Dale Scott. I'm Bob Busser. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back again soon. And always remember, take the road to the left because you never know what you'll find. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.